Good evening, my lovely patrons, or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. It is evening over here. Welcome to this month's 40-minute long video podcast, and it features this new painting titled "The Song of the Antheas" in French, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but thank you all, first of all, for being my patrons and especially for your support this month. It's really helpful in months like these when I'm preparing for solo shows or big gallery shows and I can't really rely on selling these pieces yet, or even, taking the time that I usually have to promote and sell things on social media. So your support this month really, really has helped me in a very stressful time, and I just want to start off this podcast by giving you guys my sincerest gratitude and love. So this piece was voted on, you guys, in this month's poll. Thank you to everyone who voted. I'm quite excited to give you all a first look because I haven't shared this yet on YouTube or on social media. I have not shared the video of it yet. And also, I think for this month's video tutorial, which if you're seeing this podcast, you should also have access to the video tutorial. That piece, Breathe, has also not been shared in video format on social media. So you guys get all the early bird previews and sneak peeks this month, and I'm never been happier to do so. So I asked you guys to post your questions to me earlier this month, and we have about 17 questions to go through, and I'm going to try my best to make sure I get through all of them. So without further ado, let's get started with the Q&A. The first question is from Jessica McFarlane, who says, "Hi, Happy. My question to you would be, how did you transition mentally from viewing art as a hobby to looking at it as a real source of income? What made you realize that you could do it? Unfortunately, there is a lot of discouraging feedback from the people closest to me, and due to this lack of support or belief that this can be a real job, is starting to make me wonder if I'm just as crazy as my family makes me sound. I would love to know what motivated you as a successful full-time artist the most, and what pushed you to make it happen. Thank you, and I apologize if this has been asked already." No problem at all. I'm more than happy to answer this question as many times as people want. I think it's a really important mindset and outlook to share. For me, I definitely went through similar experiences as you when I first wanted to be a full-time artist. I mean, I was actually a kid when I dreamt of becoming an artist, and when you're a child, people are always very encouraging. They kind of baby you. They're like, yeah, you can be anything you want as long as you try hard. And then when I became an adult, especially when I applied to college, the feedback from those around me, my family, my friends, society, was the whole starving artist stereotype. And it's not a real job. There's so much risk. There's not a lot of a high rate of success in this industry. And, I bought into that. And that's why I wasn't an artist for so long. Honestly, one of the biggest drivers for me deciding to become a full-time artist was how unhappy I was doing anything else. I had tried, I studied something completely different in college. I worked in a completely different industry. I switched companies many times, and none of it made me happy. I just kept thinking about what could have been and, what an artist's life would be like. And during that time, when I really made the decision to quit my job and become a full-time artist, my fiance was one of the most supportive people in my life. He really gave me a lot of encouragement and almost pushed me to do it because he could see how unhappy I was. So having that at home, like coming home to someone who was supportive, even though there was a sea of voices out there, including my own, that were filled with doubt, really, really helped. But even if you don't have that, if you don't have one person in your life telling you that you can make it or supporting you, you can totally be that person for yourself. You can totally be your biggest fan, because at the end of the day, no matter what other people say, whether it's positive or negative comments, it still boils down to how much you believe in yourself and how invested you are in this journey. And, being a quote unquote successful full-time artist, I'm flattered that you think of me that way, but it still comes with its struggles. It didn't start off very easily, and even to this day, it's not a predictable, guaranteed success. There's ups and downs. So I would say if you're really serious about this, Don't take what other people say to heart. Don't even take kind of the ups and downs of this industry or of your career to heart. Just make sure that you keep your head down and continue plowing through and continue hustling, because the bad times are what kind of test you, and making it through the bad times is the experience that makes you stronger, makes you more capable. If everything was a completely obstacle-free uphill climb, upward trajectory, so to speak, then you would never know how to deal with situations that could go wrong or deal with unexpected turn of events. So I would say, even when things are rough and you feel like you're not going anywhere, you feel like you don't know what you're doing, or your paintings aren't good enough, or you're not growing fast enough in sales or social media, still cherish those moments, because those are the moments that really help you and push you to grow the hardest. So yeah, hopefully this kind of answers your question and gives you that support that you need. I also want to quickly add, before I move on to the next question, that you'll always hear discouraging feedback, even if you are successful and you've already quote unquote made it. There's just, you can never make everybody happy. So the best thing you can do is block all that out and just focus on yourself, focus on motivating yourself and finding the strength from within, instead of relying on what other people think. Because like I said, you can never make anyone happy, or you can never make everyone happy, no matter how hard you try or how perfect your life is. Stephanie Oplinger, sorry if I mispronounce your name, asks, what are some of the things you wish somebody had told you at the beginning of your art career, from how to build a social media following to art materials, art tips, approaching galleries, etc.? So I actually have a video about this on YouTube if you guys want to hear a more in-depth answer to this question. It's called Things I Wish I Knew Before I Became an Artist. You can just simply search that on YouTube with my name attached to it if you want to check out the video. But to answer this question now, I would say, in terms of building social media, I wish someone had told me that it's not a steady increase, it's not a steady acceleration, because I was under the impression that once you got to a high enough number of followers, that it would kind of be on autopilot. So like the more followers you had, the faster you grew. I thought it was kind of this exponential curve, when in reality there's ups and downs regardless of how many followers you have. So I wish that in the beginning someone had told me that, and that I didn't pay attention to the numbers so much, because as I grew in number of followers, I also upped the expectations for myself and for my page's performance, so to speak. And I think that kind of mindset was really toxic, because what it boils down to, most important of all, is creating, the process of creating. Sharing it, of course, is very important for getting the word out, reaching and connecting with awesome people such as you guys, and also making a career and selling so that you can continue this art career. But I think ultimately the one thing that you have to make sure is consistent, that you have to make sure is tended to, and the one thing that's the most crucial to any of this happening is the art you create, and how much you enjoy the process and how involved you are in the process. So yeah, I guess I wish someone had told me that social media has its ups and downs regardless of how much you grow. No one's immune from a bad day, so don't let those bad days get you down. And I also wish someone had told me that, most important thing of all is to take care of your art and your craft and your creativity. In terms of art materials, I think also, if I had invested in more expensive art materials in the beginning, I would have definitely preferred that more. I'm not saying that, everyone should go out there and immediately buy expensive art materials, but I think once I decided to become a full-time professional artist, I wish I had upgraded or switched to the more higher artist grade quality materials earlier, because nowadays, I pretty much only use higher quality materials, especially for commissions or gallery shows, because I want, paying customers to have the best. And a lot of my older, cheaper supplies are being left unused. I gave a huge batch away a while back, so that's good. I'm glad they're going to a good home. But yeah, I think if I had switched to better quality materials earlier on, I could have saved some money, because I wouldn't have wasted the cheaper materials that I no longer have use for. And in terms of approaching galleries, I actually think I wish I knew when the right timing was. So whether it's waiting or taking the plunge and not waiting too long, I think I was a bit confused on both situations. So at first I was really, really insecure about my art and always felt like I wasn't good enough and was never ready to apply to galleries. So I waited, I think, almost too long. So I was discouraged and self-conscious, and I just didn't apply to any galleries or even cafes. I just thought, I'm not good enough yet. But then I think after a while, I realized I'll always think I'm really bad at what I do. Or like, not really bad, but I'll always find imperfections and places I need to improve. I'll never think, I'm definitely ready, or like, I'm definitely good enough for this gallery. So, when it came time to actually applying to galleries, I think at first I waited too long, and then I didn't wait long enough because I'm like, I don't think I'll ever be ready, so why not just apply to every single gallery? The truth is there are different, in my opinion, feel free to disagree, but there are many different tiers of galleries. So there are some galleries that are more open to newer artists or artists who are not as developed in their style or their skill set, or even, cafes or different arenas that you can display your art in. It doesn't have to be a gallery. It can even be like an art fair. And then there are galleries that are really, really top-notch and do have a really high caliber of entry and, a high standard for their work. So I think if I had established that understanding earlier on, I would have known which galleries were more suited for me at different times of my career, different times of my own progress and improvement as an artist. The next question is from Michelle, and she says, when you're settled in Seattle, will you consider hosting a painting meetup or other gathering? And also, when you first were starting out and making a living painting, did you reach out to mentors? If so, would you share more on that story? So to answer the first question, definitely would love to host a meetup or attend more art events. When I was a college student in Seattle, I loved going to the art walks and just meeting all the artists, and there were little drawing jams and events where you got to create art instead of just viewing it. So definitely I plan on involving myself and engaging in the art community there, because there is a really awesome art community in Seattle. And in terms of finding mentors, I actually didn't know anybody who was in the art industry. So when I first started, a lot of it was just me reading, interviews or watching videos or researching online. I didn't have any in-person mentors or even online friends who I could ask directly for advice. So there was not a human being that I could ask a question to and get an answer from directly. It was mostly all research and trial and error. And I would say, I think it definitely helps to have a mentor, but I know there is also a lot of helpful information out there that doesn't require a conversation with an artist. A lot of times, if you just read up on an artist's interviews and tips that they have given on social media, it's pretty much the same as a conversation with them. So even if you don't have a mentor to talk to one-on-one, that doesn't mean that you can't be mentored by the information that a lot of these established artists have to share. You just have to do a little bit of digging and a little bit of research on your own. Here is another question from Stephanie, who says, I am new to oil paints and find them so much more difficult to use than acrylics. How do you clean your brushes, and how thinly do you apply each layer, and how long does it take for each layer to dry? So lately, I've been using Liquin. You can also use Galkit from Gamblin. They're very similar. With a fast drying medium, honestly, it takes at most a day or two to dry, especially since I usually apply my layers pretty thinly. I don't play a lot with rough, lumpy textures. So yeah, each layer I apply thin enough to make the coverage that I want, and also to dry very fast. So I really don't know how to quantify how thin I apply each layer, but I would say it's definitely thin. You won't be able to see visible brush strokes most of the time, except for parts that are super opaque, like really, really bright highlights, for example. And because of that, and combined with the right fast drying mediums, it only takes a few days to dry. That being said, if you don't have a fast drying medium, if you don't use a medium at all, or if you use a slow drying medium, it can take up to a week, sometimes 2 weeks. It really, really depends on the color, the type of paint, the brand of paint, the type of medium, but generally no more than a few days. And I usually stagnate my pieces, so I work on several at a time. So while one is drying, I work on another one, and so forth, so that I don't end up just waiting for pieces to dry without anything to work on. And how I clean my brushes, I rinse them out first with a solvent. Currently I use Gamsol from Gamblin, which is odorless mineral spirits, and then I rinse it out in my silly coil jar, which is a great jar for cleaning your brushes because it has a metal coil in the middle. You can get it from most art supply stores. And then every once in a while, I'll use Master's brush cleaner, which is like a type of soap designed specifically for cleaning brushes. And that will bring life back to my brushes. It makes them soft, makes them easy to work with. And then lay them flat to dry, or when they're dry, make sure the bristles of your brushes are pointing down so that gravity can basically pull out all of the gooky chemicals and gunk from your brush. Okay, next question is from Lucy Chen, and she says, "Hi Happy, I wonder if you can share your reference photos / models if you use any. Really interested in seeing this part of the creative process. Thanks." Yeah, if you guys like that, please let me know. Feel free to comment on this post if you also agree. But yeah, I will definitely be more than happy to share more posts like this with you guys if you're curious to see kind of my process photo habits, I guess, because I definitely Frankenstein a bunch of things together. I never use only one photo. I usually change a bunch of stuff up. Like for example, this particular piece, I actually took a photo of my own hand and arm to get that webbed hand reference. And I used several references for the fish. And I used one reference for the overall pose of the body, except, I changed the arm. And then the face, I definitely strayed super far from the reference and kind of created my own face. So my reference photo process is very, I would say, improvisational. I don't really make my reference photos super polished before I start painting. I kind of just make a collage or like a mood board, and I put it all together kind of in my head. This next question is really interesting, from Heidi/Tracy, and she basically is asking, what do your hobbies do for your art and your life? She had a quote from another artist who said, "Before I was interested in plants, I didn't see plants. I just didn't see them. But then when I learned to love them, I saw them everywhere." So Heidi/Tracy is asking if this quote applies to me and my hobbies such as diving. What does it do for my art and my life? And is this comparable with my relationship with the ocean? So this body of work, this mermaid solo show, is partially inspired by my recent love for diving. It's something that I picked up in the last year or so. My fiance got me really into it, so I've been on a few diving trips. I even got my advanced certification. Woo! But yeah, definitely, I think it's an otherworldly experience. And before I actually went diving on my own, when people talked about it or when I heard about it or saw it, I was like, cool, this seems, it's cool, whatever. And it was just like a passing thought. But then once I experienced it for myself and allowed myself to fall in love with it, it just completely like captured my soul, and it's become such a huge source of inspiration for my paintings. I paint a lot of fish and corals that I've seen in dives, and that my fiance has in his saltwater aquarium that we have. So I'm super inspired by ocean elements now. It seriously does feel like an alien world on our own planet Earth. I also wanted to read what Heidi/Tracy said to me, and she said, "Sometimes I think artists fail to connect to the world around them, worried it will steal time from their art, but I'm beginning to see how easy it is for them to miss the boat by staying on the grind, aka like, I guess, working, when they could do more for themselves by diving or simply gardening." And I definitely really agree with that. I think as important as it is to work and just grind and hustle, it's also important to take the time to experience life and absorb the things around you, because that is where the inspiration comes from. And yeah, this quote and this question was really interesting, and thank you so much for asking it. And yeah, I hope my answer was satisfying as well. Cheryl asks, hi, Happy. I just wanted to ask that when you started to make prints, did you struggle a lot to do the editing and match the colors well with the original? Is it possible to edit the colors same as the original 100%? I don't think it's impossible, but it's really hard to get something to look 100% matching with the original. That being said, with the right practice on Photoshop, you can definitely get it super, super close. And I guess the thing I struggled with when I first started making prints was, even if the colors match the original on my monitor, it doesn't necessarily mean that the printed version will look the same. And also, depending on what paper you use and what printer you use, the digital file could translate very differently in the physical print. So it's important to, at least in my opinion, for making my own prints, I use the same monitor, the same printer, and that way I can take a lot of the guesswork out of how the digital file will translate into a print. And I also, over the years, definitely started to pick up little patterns or remembered little things about, like, how does the matte fine art paper look versus the glossy fine art paper, things like that. And I would say I definitely struggled in the beginning, but over time, it got easier with more practice and as I got more familiar with my whole printing setup. So yeah, if it's a struggle for you right now, don't give up. Just keep going at it. Make sure you pay attention to the types of papers you use, the printer you use, and I would say try to keep everything consistent. So the same monitor, same printer, and same papers. And I think because I did have a background in Photoshop, it helped a lot. But with Photoshop, there's so many ways you can edit a photo. It's not just a matter of, adjusting the brightness and the contrast, but you can adjust, tweak very minute things about the color. You could say, for all the red hues, I want it to have less red and more blue or something. There's so many little tools you can use. And yeah, I would say YouTube really helped me a lot too with these tutorials and just seeing what people can do. So definitely don't give up, and Photoshop is a very powerful tool. The next question is from Linda, who says, hi, Happy. Hope everything is going well with your preparations for the solo show. Well, thank you, Linda. Lots of love and luck. Lots of love right back to you. Here is my question. How do you avoid that your brushes dry out? I always clean my brushes right after I use them, but sometimes they're really hard and dry when I want to paint again. I think it is because of the medium that I use to clean them. I live in Germany, and sadly I can't purchase anything from Gamblin, not even via Amazon. Does using oils help? Have a lovely day. Hope my question makes sense. My English isn't perfect either. Well, your English sounds pretty perfect to me, and your question definitely made sense. So I also struggled with brushes drying out before, and I think what I realized was that I wasn't getting all the paint out. So the silly coil jar changed my life. I'm pretty sure you can buy the silly coil jar on Amazon or at your local art store. And if you don't have one, you can make it yourself. So get anything that's kind of wiry or mesh. Sometimes I use what are those called? Those metal spools that you can use to scrub gunk off of your cast iron pans. I forgot what they're called, but they're basically a ball made of fine metal wires. So I used to use those when I didn't have my silly coil jar. But rubbing your brush against a metal or rough surface really helps get the paint out from the bristles. And honestly, if you get all your paint out and you use paint a good paint solvent. So I use Gamsol from Gamblin. If you can't buy that, I would say a good substitute is terpenoid, which is another odorless mineral spirit. They're very similar. If you just use terpenoid or Gamsol and you get all the paint out of your brushes, they shouldn't be super dry the next day. They should actually, be fairly usable. And ever since I purchased a silly coil jar and started cleaning my brush bristles against a wire rough surface, I never had to deal with that dry brush feeling, especially when I cleaned them super, super thoroughly. So if you load your brush with a lot of paint, I would say give it 3 or 4 rinses. So scrub it, clean it, wipe it, and repeat 3 or 4 times just to make sure you get all the paint out. I would also say try to avoid loading your brush with too much paint, because that's something that I think I did a lot in the beginning before I had enough practice with oil paints. you actually don't need to load up your brush with a lot of paint to achieve most of the effects you want to achieve, unless you're color blocking. Like if you have like for example, in this piece, when I was doing the black background, I just loaded up a big brush with a lot of black paint and smeared it around. But for the most part, like in terms of small details or even skin tones, you don't need that much paint. You need just a little bit on your brush, and every now and then when you deposit new paint on your brush, make sure to always rinse it in between, because it kind of creeps up on you. Your brush ends up getting loaded way faster than you anticipate. So I always make sure between, it's hard to put a number on it, but I would say every 2 or 3 times that I load my brush, I would clean it in between. So always make sure the brush maintains a constant state of cleanliness and never has too much paint on it. And yeah, I don't know what solvent you are using to clean it, but again, I really recommend the Masters Brush Cleanser. Like I mentioned before, it's really great for revitalizing those old hard brushes and making them soft again. And honestly, it might also be the type of brush you use. I definitely find that the higher quality, more expensive brushes last through way more cleanings than the cheaper ones. The cheaper ones end up being frayed or, not really popping back to life very easily, and they kind of have to be disposed a lot more frequently. Whereas the fancier and higher quality brushes, they cost more, but they also last longer. So I've had brushes that I've cleaned and used for years and are still in great shape and can still be reused. So it's really a toss-up between like kind of what you pay for is what you get. Okay, we have another question about cleaning brushes from Ellie, who this question is about cleaning brushes that I use for varnish. So she says, "Hi Happy, I love your work. It's so inspiring." Well, thank you. Just a quick question. How do you clean the brushes you use to varnish paintings? I have trouble cleaning the varnish out and sometimes I have to throw them away. Thanks so much. So for my varnishing process, I actually use a really, really nice brush. It's from the Royal and Langnickel brand, and it's a huge brush. I actually believe it costs around maybe $40-something or $30-something retail, but you can definitely get a cheaper one that's not as big. But that brush I only use to varnish, and I've cleaned it many, many times in between varnishes. And like I mentioned before, use the Masters Brush Cleaner. It's basically like a soap that comes in a plastic round disc container. I have a huge like jumbo version of it that's basically the size of like a frisbee, and I've been using it for years. And I find that paint thinner, so like the thing I use for oil paints, doesn't work as well on varnish. I use Gamvar by Gamblin, by the way. So after I varnish, I soak the brush with a little bit of warm water so that I can get the soap to activate and create the foam, and then I scrub it against the surface of the soap. I use my fingers to work the soap through the bristles. I rinse it out and I repeat this 3 or 4 times at least, and I find that my brush can be clean and usable for the next varnish session. But yeah, Masters Brush Cleaner, I'm not paid to advertise for them. It's just something I've used since I was, just starting out, and it's something I swear by. So I would suggest picking that up. So whether it's varnish or paint, it really does bring the life back to my brushes. Like I once found this varnish brush that I accidentally forgot to clean for, probably months, and it was hard as rock, and the Master Brush Cleaner brought it back to life. So I would say a combination of Master Brush Cleaner plus repeated washes, not just once, and also using a better quality, more durable brush really helps with the varnishing brush cleaning process. The next question is from Lucy, who says, "Hi Happy, I have another question for you, but maybe you've answered this before, but I can't find it yet." First of all, don't worry about that. I am more than happy to repeat these questions, especially because I don't expect people to go through every video I've made, so no worries at all. But Lucy says, "What camera do you use for recording your time lapse, and how do you set up for recording both the time lapse and the live stream at the same time? Thanks." So for my time lapses, I use my Canon DSLR. It's a Rebel T5i. I've used it for many years now, and I love it. It's got like a screen that you can flip so you can see what you're recording. Prior to that, for some of my earlier videos when I was first starting out my YouTube channel, I used a Canon T2i, which is like the same brand. It's a Rebel T2i EOS, but you know, it was just an older version and it didn't have the flippable screen. So the screen definitely helps when you can see what you're recording. And for recording both the time-lapse and the live stream, so for those of you who've seen my live streams or even watched them after I've recorded them, you know I have a really awkward process of like transitioning the webcam from pointing at my face to pointing at my easel. So I basically have my DSLR recording the time-lapse on a tripod, which I got from Amazon, just like a very normal photo tripod. And then I have this vlogging tripod that I got, I think also from Amazon, which has these adjustable legs that you can wrap around things. So I put the webcam on the adjustable small vlogging tripod and I wrap the legs of that around my DSLR, which is standing on top of a normal tripod. And then I basically point both the webcam and my DSLR at the painting and I press record and just live stream. It's a really awkward process, but it works. And I definitely want to find out, and probably, I heard it costs quite a bit of money to get the equipment, but I'm ready to invest in it soon, especially after my move. But I'm really wanting to try out how to live stream from my DSLR because I heard that that's possible. So that would be awesome if I could just use one camera to point at my easel. I can, you know, have it be higher quality. I can zoom in and I can record at the same time. But yeah, that's something that I just lately haven't found the time to sit down and research and experiment with because it does take a while for me to ramp up on new technology. And I've just been super busy with, you know, shows and moving and stuff. But yeah, definitely it's on my to-do list. My yearly goals on my bullet journal is to figure out how to live stream from my DSLR so that I don't have to deal with this weird, you know, kind of impromptu setup. The next question is from Kaylee Myers, who says, was there a specific piece that made your art career blow up? I've been doing commissions here and there for friends for years, and it seems the only way artists get popular these days is to create some sort of viral time-lapse or something that's very shareable. What was your turning point in your career? So to be honest, I don't think there was ever one piece that catapulted my career or one video that catapulted my channel. You know, I wasn't maybe that lucky. Like I've never had a video on Instagram or on YouTube that's exceeded like 1 million views. And even then, like I mentioned before, just because it gives you a little bit of momentum, like a burst of momentum, doesn't mean that it's going to last long or that it's going to significantly change your career. I think what's important is that you post quality content consistently and frequently, and you know, wishing or hoping for one viral like big break. You know, it's awesome when it happens, and it's definitely like, you know, super humbling and an awesome experience, but I don't think that can make a career. That just gives you a temporary viral like popularity, or maybe a temporary boost, you know, in your sales or in your growth. But what makes a long-lasting career is consistency and making sure that, you know, you continue to push yourself, improve as an artist, and post that quality content consistently. So don't give up. The next question is from Sai Chi, who says, hi Happy, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you built your website. I know that you made a YouTube video on how to make a website with Wix, but I really love the website that you currently have with Squarespace. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of Squarespace and why you chose to use their service? I'm researching different platforms for my own art website right now, and any advice you have would be amazing. Thank you. So yeah, I have been using Squarespace for a while, and recently Wix did improve a lot so that they're definitely more comparable with Squarespace now. But the reason why I chose Squarespace and still continue to use Squarespace is that I love how modern and clean everything is, from the templates that they have you use to the tools that they have for editing and, you know, managing your website. I also love that they have a really strong online e-commerce platform that's integrated very well with the website. So you can have your portfolio, your like about me sections, and also your online shop all under one consistent, cohesive site. So yeah, I think with Squarespace, I was first drawn to just how beautiful and sleek and modern their templates were. And then I just really fell in love with the tools, and I became really acclimated to them over the years. So it's hard to change and switch to, a new tool. That being said, there are definitely more options out there that offer a lot more granular control and more options if your focus is on e-commerce. Like I know Shopify and Etsy, and I can't even think of the other ones, but there are definitely a lot of like e-commerce focused platforms that can help. But if you're looking for a hybrid, so for me, I wanted like a portfolio website and a shop all in one. I really recommend Squarespace, and especially if you're a fan of really modern template design, and not having to know how to code was also a huge plus, because you don't have to really do any coding on your website. You just kind of use the tools that they have, and it's been really helpful. But yeah, like I said, Wix lately has really improved, and their tools are way more easier to use than before, and their designs are also a lot more modern as well. Jacinta asks, do you still use glazing as a technique in your oil paintings? How many years of concerted practice did it take until you felt confident with your work? For example, portrait paintings. So occasionally I do definitely still use glazing, though I try to minimize it because I find that when I glaze, sometimes it messes with how glossy that section is, and I just want to make sure my entire piece has a consistent glossy sheen or lack thereof, so that it's easier to scan and photograph. But yeah, glazing I still use when I want to just add very subtle pops of color, and you can definitely achieve similar effects without using mediums. You can just use like a dry brush and a little bit of paint and kind of rub that on. But in terms of how many years of concerted practice did it take for me to feel confident? So to be honest, I don't feel super confident even to this day. Like every painting I say a little prayer and I'm like, oh my God, please don't, mess up. Please don't make any mistakes. It's impossible for me to guarantee that I'll do a great job or that the thing will come out looking exactly how I want. But I think definitely after, I would say 2 years of practicing pretty much every day, I actually started to, feel more comfortable, I guess, and feel like I do have a process or a technique that I can rely on and go back to and fall back on every time. So it does take a while. It also depends on how much you practice in a day. So if you're painting like 10 hours a day, it might take you less time. But if you're only painting like every now and then an hour a week, it might take you longer. So it also is different for each person. In general, I'm not a super confident person when it comes to my work. I'm very self-critical and I'm always looking for ways to improve. So yeah, I would say even to this day, I'm not super confident in how I'm doing. But yeah, after 2 years, I definitely became a lot more comfortable. The last question is from Luz Tapia, who says, since you're preparing a solo show and you're planning your move, how do you find balance to do your painting, prepare everything for Seattle, and find time for home chores? I find it so interesting to know how other artists balance their artist life with cooking and everything. Also, how do you keep motivated through all of those stuff you have to do? That's a good question because I have been really stressed out these past few months, specifically this past month. It's been super hectic and unexpected things come up with renovating a house and selling a house and even working on a solo show, like buying frames, all that stuff. It's not just about painting. So I honestly don't know if I'm doing the best job at managing my motivation or stress levels. There have been nights where I panic and cry and I'm really stressed out and I worry and I don't know what to do. And, there are other nights where, if I just kind of put my head down and get to work, I think getting things done definitely helps ease the anxiety because I feel like I'm making progress on actually getting rid of the anxiety. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm not perfect at managing it. I just try to get as much done as I can during the day, and I have definitely had to sacrifice a lot of, fun things like socializing or, cooking at home or, relaxing and spending time with my loved ones. These days, I pretty much work a full day, from when I wake up until like 7 or 8 p.m. And then after that, I focus on planning and moving and doing chores to help with the move. It's not really sustainable. I drink a lot of coffee. I end up losing a lot of sleep, but I know it's only temporary. And once things get settled down, I'm really looking forward to having a normal schedule again and having time to actually relax at the end of a workday instead of, doing more work, so to speak. But yeah, thank you for asking. And for those of you who have sent me well wishes and concerns, you guys really make it a lot easier to bear through these tough times. And this video podcast is going to come to an end very soon. I just wanted to thank you all so much for your support, and I hope to meet some of you in Denver. And I can't wait to share more with you next month. Bye.